You are here to see 50 games every game designer should play. If you want to learn about RPGs, Wolfgang is doing an awesome talk down the way. So, well, there'll be a little bit of RPGs in here. Basically, let's start with who I am. That's me. This is from a video some friends and I did on YouTube. Look up the game designers, and we pretended to be cops in a 70s show, except we were game designers. So I have been, this is probably 24 years now, anyways, as a professional game designer. I started my career at Wizards of the Coast working on Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. Then I worked on a MMO at a small company at Artifact Entertainment, started my own game company. Then I worked at Gamehouse, at Zynga, at Motiga, PopCap, and currently I'm employed by the Pokemon Company, so it all comes full circle around as I work on the Pokemon TCG again. These are the different some of the games I have worked on. You may know me from Smash Up, it's sort of my biggest hit, but I also worked on an MMO and a bunch of Facebook games, and iPhone games, and Plants vs. Zombie Heroes, and tons of stuff. Magic, Pokemon. I think I've worked on like 12 different collectible card games in my career. But what we're here to talk about today is the games that game designers should play. And it's really, the point of this talk is that as a game designer, what you want to do is learn from other game designers. And if you go and start playing these games, when you play them, if you think about them, if you're sort of present while playing them and thinking about what you're actually doing and why you're doing it, you're going to learn a lot more. So the point of this is to think about these games as you play them, to deconstruct them and examine the pieces. Some of these, and I'll talk a little bit about them when we're going through them, there's a specific piece that I'm talking about that's really cool, or that if you examine it, it'll help, and you take that piece and use it in someplace else, you're going to learn a lot from it. Like, a lot of game design is about picking pieces of things you like and turning them into other things. My game Smash Up, not Smash Up, sorry, my game Guillotine actually came from a conversation that we had mixed with my favorite piece from a game called Family Business, which is a mafia-themed card game. But there's a part in that game where you put all your little mafia guys up on a wall and they get killed from the front to the back. And so there's a little mini game in there where you're quickly switching them around. I was like, that's amazing. So I eventually kind of turned it into its own game. And then, so deconstruct the games and then apply what you're learning to your own designs. These are unimportant details about what I'm going to talk about. Is it fun? Well, hopefully you're playing games that are fun, but as a game designer, you actually want to play games that have important lessons, even if you're not having fun while doing it. Often I get asked, like, what's a good piece of advice for beginning game designers? And it's play games that you wouldn't normally play. If all you play are the games you like the most, those are probably very similar, and you're not going to learn as much as if you go play Monopoly with your family, or if you go play a game that isn't fun. I'm also not really talking about whether a specific game here is historically relevant. There's a lot that can be learned from looking at when a game was designed and what was going on, but that's not sort of the purpose of this talk. And I also don't care whether the game is original or not, because you can learn a lot more, or you can learn a lot from the best in breed of a game, even if it's not the first example of it. So, all right, let's jump in. Let's start with backgammon. Backgammon, I'm sure most people in this have played with backgammon. The question is, have you played with backgammon with the doubling cube? Backgammon is a great game. You roll the dice, you move the things around, there's a lot of strategy involved, but the doubling cube is brilliant. And if you've never played it with the doubling cube, you've played backgammon, but you haven't really played backgammon. Basically what the doubling cube does is, at a point in the game, one of the players can take it and say, let's raise the stakes. I'm going to double the amount of points this game is made. If you're playing backgammon for points across many games, you're like, this game's now worth double. Are you still willing to play from this point? And you can do that whether you're ahead, and then the other person may just give up and be like, well, you're ahead, and I don't think I can win. I just give up. Or you can do it when you're behind, and now the other person has to think about whether they're willing to risk the rolls of the dice that are going to make this game continue. So the important things are the inclusion of this metagame element, this sudden desire to just be like, now this game's worth twice as much, are you still willing to play? Or double or nothing. And that changes the entire course of the game. The game will just either end there or now have even more stakes. Artemis, and there's now there's Bridge Crew on VR and things like that. This game is great for game designers because you can learn how people who have different game rules, you can coordinate them. There's actually board games that are like this too, Space Alert and things like that, or Captain Sonar. But in this particular instance, like, you have to learn how to coordinate what you're doing, which is very different from what somebody else is doing, and make it all work together and make the ship fly and shoot at things. Billionaire Banshee. This is a party game. The rules of Billionaire Banshee are very simple. You take one good quality and one bad quality of a potential date that you're going to go on, and then everybody at the table has to bet whether you will actually go on this date. So look, you've met somebody who's a professional racer, but you found out that they want to eat one of your toes. And now everybody at the table has to decide whether you would date somebody who wants to eat one of your toes, but they're a professional racer. So basically, you meet a billionaire who's also a banshee. Are you going to date them? It's a fun little game, but the game changes a lot if you're playing with strangers or you're playing with friends. So the role that prior knowledge can play in the interactions is very important. I played it with a friend of mine who's very proudly Jewish, and she got one of the good things was, I don't remember, it was amazing. Like, she can teach you how to fly. And then the bad thing, though, is a Holocaust denier. It didn't matter what the good thing was. We knew that it did not matter what the good thing was. The answer was no, and that was the role that our knowledge can play in a game, the knowledge that we bring to a game, especially in a party game, especially when you're playing with friends. Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, my favorite Assassin's Creed because you get to be a pirate. There are many things that you can learn from playing just Assassin's Creed, like the movement in Assassin's Creed and how to make it contextual. Like when you run up to a wall, it knows that your control scheme changes when you get close to a wall, and now when you move forward, you're not just going to move forward into the wall, you're going to go up. When you get near the edge of a building, it knows that when you continue to move forward or when you jump, that it's going to do different things, and you're going to grab bars, and you're going to do all of that. That's really awesome. This is like one of the best examples of how to make contextual movement in a video game very important. And the ship-to-ship combat in here is really amazing. They've got a really good control scheme for simplifying something that's incredibly complex. Attacking, you're just like, I want to go faster, I want to go slower, I want to turn right, I want to turn left, I want to shoot, all of that stuff. So, Cheating Moth. Cheating Moth is it's kind of an Uno-ish game, basically. There's a pile in the middle. On your turn, you try to play a card that matches the card in the middle. Like if this is on the card in the middle, then you want to play one of those on top of it. There's some special abilities. But the important thing in Cheating Moth is that there's a person who's currently the leader, and everybody's just playing the game. Anybody who's not the leader is allowed to, the point of the game is to get rid of all the cards in your hand like Uno. But at any time, you can just drop one, and it's gone. And if the leader didn't notice it, it's just gone. You got away with it. Yay! This game is not very good to play with a 5-year-old on your lap who's watching you drop cards as you go. But it's an interesting way to take cheating and make it part of the game. A lot of games have done this. The Illuminati back in the day was like, you can cheat anything. Munchkin, you can get away with anything that's cheating. And but this is much more like codified as to what you're allowed to do and how interesting it is, and it's really cool that it turns the cheating into part of the game. Braid is really popular independent RPG. I'm sorry, computer RPG, sort of RPG. But it really is one of the first times. There's a lot of time travel games now, but this is one of the first times that it was done really well about how to turn it roguelike and to go back and do a level you've done before, but now you've changed things, and so it's different this time. Really, like, best in breed on how to deal with a very difficult thing to do, time travel in a video game. Codenames. Party game. One player on each side is the leader and gives clues that try to make people pick all of the stuff here. Try to pick the correct things. Like, this is the pattern. The blues want to pick those particular the cards that exist in that pattern. The reds want to pick the other one, and you're giving clues, and your team is guessing from your clues. This is a really good example of this team-based gameplay with a leader who says, you know, who is giving clues. But it's also, this is often true with party games and with cooperative games. It's communication with limited tools. The leader is only allowed to say one word or small phrase and a number, like dentistry 5. And from that, their team has to decide which 5 of those they're talking about and try to pick the correct ones. And if they get it wrong, the turn ends, and you could actually give stuff to your opponent. So, but really good example of team-based gameplay, because it's also a really good example of how to play with large numbers, because you can have teams of like 10 on each side, and it works just fine because there's just one leader and all the other people are just trying to guess what they're doing. So, Bushido Blade. Has anybody played Bushido Blade? It's an old fighting game. Before Bushido Blade, there are many other fighting games, you know, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, all of those things, and they're all just, I mean, there's a lot of skill involved in those games, don't get me wrong, but they're very fast-paced, very like jump forward, jump in, kick the guy, but they're played over like you do a bunch of damage, you do a bunch of damage, you do a bunch of damage, yay. Bushido Blade is you're both standing there with your sword, and all of a sudden somebody moves and they may just kill the other person instantly. The pacing in this game is amazing. And sometimes the other person will block and a little bit of damage will be done, and really good players, like there's some back and forth and things like that, but basically at any particular time, these people have swords and they could kill the other person instantly. And it's a really, really cool that when it came out, that it just changed the pacing of fighting games. It's not Street Fighter in any way. It's a very slow, it's much more like a duel would be, where just, or duels in Japanese movies where they stare at each other for a minute and then one person rushes in, that kind of thing. Colt Express is a fun game. It won many awards a few years back. It's not as popular as it was, but this is just interesting to play this with different audiences because the experience is very different. This game won like huge awards. And if you play it with normal people, you'll have a great time. I played it with game designers, and at the end of the game, we all tore it apart, and we hated the game, and we didn't want to play it anymore because there was a disparity between the powers you're given at the beginning of the game, and it was just like, well, his power's just better. And it was just an interesting example of how there's many things like this, like Monopoly is kind of the same thing too, where who you play with is very important. And if you examine when you're playing with them, whether everybody had a good Splendor's an excellent example too, of who you're playing with will definitely affect whether you had fun in the game or not. Clash Royale, huge hit. Not as big as it was, but Clash Royale is a great game to play though, and to play it seriously and be in a guild and everything, because you will learn they have one of the best guild systems around. They have the social dynamics that happen in guilds. They have mechanics that encourage you to help new players, like desperately. People are desperate to help because the rewards you get for helping are somewhat unique to what you can get when you're a high-level player. And so the implementation there is just amazing. They have one of the best UIs in mobile gaming, like just swiping to get from gameplay to guilds to all of the things. It's just the sort of Tinder UI elements that they have are just like, we tried to copy it almost instantly as soon as we saw it when I was working on PvZ Heroes and failed. And of course, this is a perfect example of appointment-based rewards in mobile gaming, where you need to come back in 5 hours because you've got a chest that's going to unlock, and oh, you've got 3 chests, you better come back in 5 hours to open up a new slot to get a new chest, etc. Contract bridge. So who's played bridge? Probably most people have played or know bridge somewhat. Have you ever played contract bridge? Yeah. So bridge is an awesome game because all the cards get dealt out to everybody, and it's an important skill to learn to track the location of game pieces and to be like, aha, he's got the king. I know because of what he played, he has the king, or I know that he didn't play a club, so now I'm tracking all the game pieces. I know where all the clubs are. I know where all the trump are, and all of that is a very important skill that you can learn in bridge. The thing about contract bridge is the difference between bridge and contract bridge is that in contract bridge, the bidding system is way different. If you're just playing bridge with your family and you say, I've got two, and you bid 2 clubs, I was like, we can take at least 2 tricks, clubs or trump, no problem. Everybody around the table is going to think you're doing okay in clubs. If you do that in contract bridge, you've just told them you have the king of hearts. And that's just a convention. Those are called conventions. That there are these clues that you are legally able to give to your to your partner and other people by bidding in certain ways. By bidding one club and then your partner answers back with 3 diamonds, now you've got a conversation going with only these weird pieces of information, and the pieces of information you're giving are not necessarily accurate to what your hand contains. I mean, they are accurate, but not to somebody who's looking in outside who knows how to play bridge. They'd be like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on, and all of a sudden everything would change and they wouldn't know what was going on. And that's because people have that's because the metagame, the bidding structure, has been modified by the players into contract bridge, and it's just fascinating, and I hate it because when I bid 3 clubs, I want my partner to know that I'm strong in clubs, and we should maybe be in clubs, not anything else. Dark Souls and it's all the games in this series are really good to play to find out what happens when you build a game to serve a small segment of the audience. If you ask most people who are playing adventure games whether they enjoy dying, they're going to tell you no. Whether they enjoy things being super hard, they're going to tell you no. That's a no. Why would you want to just turn the corner and die instantly? That's a horrible experience unless you are the kind of person who wants the game to be as hard as possible. And that's a small segment, and this game is designed and targeted 100% at people who want the hardest possible game experience. And they've done a brilliant job of doing that. Dead of Winter, cooperative board game, but very interesting because in Dead of Winter, it's possible, it's usually true, but not always true, that one of the people is a betrayer. He's not actually on your team. But nobody knows it, so you are trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. There's zombies attacking everywhere, and you're all trying to gather food and kill the zombies, and one of the players is actually actively working against you. But maybe, which is the important bit, because you can't be just like, who's the betrayer? Somebody's the betrayer. Who's the betrayer? No, because maybe nobody is. And it's a very interesting way to play, especially as the betrayer, to try to trick everyone into thinking there is no betrayer while at the same time betraying everyone. So Diablo 3 console. Diablo 3 is a great game. You should play it just because, but that's not why I'm talking about it. I'm talking about specifically the console version. If you've played Diablo 3 on the computer, it's a great experience, and it's set up perfectly to work with a mouse and keyboard. If you have, however, played it on the console, you're going to have, it's brilliant. The adaptations they made to make it work on a console are just brilliant. And examining like how the control scheme works there, if you're familiar with how it did work on the PC, is a great exercise in how they mapped things so that you can move properly and attack well. Because on the like you could have all of these abilities on the keyboard are just numbers at the top of the thing. And you're just like 1, 2, 5, 1, 1, 1. But mapping that all to how it works when you're using a controller is a lot different, and they just did an amazing job of it. And mapping to 4 different people playing is at the same time on the same screen is brilliant. Diplomacy. Has anybody played Diplomacy? Yeah, everybody should play Diplomacy and hate it as much as I do. I like the game's brilliant. I just really hate this is like you have to betray somebody in this game in order to win. You can make these alliances and you agree on everything, and then everybody submits their turns, and then you look and see whether they actually followed through on what they said. And the game is this is like 25% of the game, and 75% of the game is going out of the room and talking to people and being like, no, I'm not going to move in on you there. That's absolutely not true. So great example of how a game can have these sort of simple rules that get blown up when people have to talk to each other. Eternal. Everybody's probably familiar with Hearthstone. Eternal is a newer game. You may be familiar with it as well. I'm using this instead of Hearthstone. Even though Hearthstone has actually gotten better at this, Eternal, like these cards, the cards in Eternal as an electronic medium, they utilize the medium really well. They're constantly like, all the cards are like, all the rest of the birds in your deck are +1 now, and things you could never do with physical, they do all the time in electronic. Or the next the next minion you gets +2/+2, like things like that. So otherwise, it's very Hearthstone-y, as you can tell. And just these games in general will teach you a lot about how to sell collectible components, how to give some away for free, have daily quests, all of those mechanics on how to do a collectible game, especially in electronic media, which is a lot different than trying to do it in physical. Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody should play Dungeons and Dragons just because it's the best, no matter what version you're in love with. But it is the original cooperative game, essentially. Like, co-op games are huge now, but this is the original co-op game. I mean, you can decide to say that the players are against the GM, but that's actually a bad D&D game. So it's a cooperative way to tell an interesting story with some rules around it. Also, guided storytelling. This is a great place to learn about how to do things like that, especially by being the DM. Long-term gameplay over many sessions, because that's what it is. You're building a character. Your character advances. This is the original Legacy game too, where you've got at the end of every session, the game changes based on what you did during that session. And it's also one of the best modular games because all of these books come out all the time, and you decide whether you want to, where you want to run it, and whether you want to include elves, and whether you want to include dwarves, and all of that stuff. All right, Final Fantasy 15: A New Empire. A year ago when I made this, there were like 3 of these games that were all at the top of the sales charts. They're still all doing great. But these games kind of have almost no gameplay. You're building your city. You're attacking other people, but really attacking other people is a matter of clicking on their town and saying, I'm attacking them, and then saying what's attacking them, but you never see what's happening, and you just get a report back later that a whole bunch of your guys died, and a whole bunch of their guys died, and you stole some resources, yay. But these games are hugely popular and hugely addicting because watching those numbers go up and watching the, in 40 minutes my arena is going to be ready. Oh, I need to be back in 40 minutes. They make this progression loop. They're best at it. They're best at making the progression loop amazing. Also, these particular games by this company reward spending in an amazing way. If I pay money into the game, if I'm part of a guild and I pay money into the game, everybody in the guild gets a free chest. That's an amazing. I feel better about buying a chest because I just helped everybody when I did it. And they also they have daily things all the time where it's like, for $5 you get $300 worth of stuff. Like they know what they're doing. And that's one of the reasons they've been at the top of the charts for so long. Dixit is a game where whoever's the judge at the moment, a set of cards get put down, or the judge has a card, he looks at it and he thinks of an interesting phrase that describes the card in some ways, and then a bunch of cards get laid down, and everybody votes on which one they think was the correct card, was based on what he said. But it's all very loose, and you're usually saying something like dreaming or walking a path. But the thing is that the judge doesn't want everybody to get it. They're going to be like crystal ball. Put it down, everybody votes for crystal ball. That's bad for them. They want a couple people to get it, which is a very interesting way to run a game. But also like with code names before, they have a limited amount of information. They have that one phrase, and they're trying to get some people but not everybody to get it. They're trying to get not nobody and not everybody to get it, basically. Gran Turismo 6. There may be a 7 coming. I'm not sure. This game is one of the best racing games around, but it's also one of the most realistic. There are 2 types of racing games. There are racing games like this that are realistic, where you can tune the brakes on your cars. You can put different, like every piece of this car is customizable and bought and sold, and put different tires on it based on what you're racing, what surface you're racing on, and whether it's raining or not. All of that is in this game. Every possible realism is in this game, and they market it that way. They're like the most realistic game, the most realistic racing game around, and it absolutely is. And it's very rewarding if you can do all of that. If you can get your car perfect and then drive it perfect, because the physics are amazing in this game too. So you have to be able to do all of that to make the game work, and so it's a really good example of how catering to people who want that realistic effect, and also people who want to run 24-hour races on their PS4. Dystopia Rising. Anybody know Dystopia Rising? Dystopia Rising is a live action role-playing game. Many people play it. They go to camps and then they play it over weekends, and they're basically it's kind of zombie apocalypse, or apocalypse anyways. And they're the survivors, and everything's horrible, but they're having a great time and being mad scientists and running around in the world. It is a really good example of real-time gameplay, obviously, because they're physically in the world, running around with weapons and having combats with enemies and things like that. Also, like, large scale. Many people, like, they have camps, and they all go down there, hundreds of people, and play it for a weekend and then come back up, and coordinating all of that and doing real scale, like, it's a blast. Keep Talking, Nobody Explodes. As two players, one player has a book, the other player is looking at a screen. The person with the book can't see the screen, the person with the screen can't see the book, and they're trying to communicate based on, okay, here's what I see, there's a red wire, and the other person's like, okay, it's a red wire, this is what we do. And they're communicating back and forth about what they can see and what they should do with what they can see, and if there's any miscommunication, somebody's going to cut the wrong wire and the bomb's going to explode. So it's a great example of how to do that, how to have this communication where both players aren't having the same experience and they're trying to communicate. Like in Artemis, everybody's kind of having the same experience. They all see the screen up there, and if it's turning left, they start yelling at the navigator, no, we're not supposed to turn left, we're supposed to turn right. Like, but in this, you can't do that. You're just like, cut the red wire, and you like hope the guy cut the red wire. Five Tribes is a board game. It is all of those meeples you see on there, on any player's turn, it's got a Mancala kind of feel to it, where on any player's turn they grab this and then they drop them in a pattern around the board, and then have some effect based on what they did, but they're leaving the board in a new state that the next player gets to use, basically. So it kind of has this cooperative gameplay, but it is just a purely competitive game. So at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out not only how to do the best for you, but not to leave your opponent a good position. And it's also a really good game of, there's a lot of these games now, it's called point salad, basically, where like you can try to own more of these tiles, you can try to collect more of these resources, you can try to get the most gins, and all of these things give you points and in various levels, and you're trying to figure out the best way to make all of those points add up. Anybody played Kingdom of Loathing? This is the really funny thing is that I'm showing you this, and like yesterday on the Switch, in the eStore on the Switch, Eastward of Loathing just came out, which is basically the newest version of this, and it's on the Switch. This is a web game where look, you're fighting a drunken half-orc hobo. He starts to hit you with his bottle of Mad Train. This is a very simple RPG. There's your stats. You just like, you're just like choosing what you want to do in any particular moment, where you want to go, what you want to do. Very simple online game. It's funny. It's a little risque at many times, like you're often fighting hobos and things. But this is a really good example of how to make a funny game. Repetition is gameplay. This is one of the first rogue, this is long after Rogue, for example, but it's roguelike. You play all the way through a story, and then at the end, you start over and you've gained a special ability that now you take through when you do it again. So, and that's just what you do. You do that over and over and over, and you play you play as a Pastamancer one time, and then you play as one of the other classes the next time. And you don't need fancy graphics. This is what it looks like, and this game was hugely popular when it came out, and obviously, and if you've seen the Switch game, it's exactly that. It's stick figures running around on a screen. And Love Letter. Love Letter has, this is the entire game for Love Letter. And like many people can play, and that's all you need. So the gameplay is very deep because it uses social cues and interactions where you're trying to guess what the other player has. And you can do that very simply if anybody has two things and you're trying to guess which 2 of 8 they have, or 1. They have 1 at any particular time except on their turn, and you're trying to guess which of them they have based on their behavior. You can get a lot of gameplay out of that, and a lot of these micro games have come out in the last few years because of this. So creation of deep gameplay with very few resources. These games are really hard to make. Excuse me. Lego Dimensions. I could have used other examples here like Skylanders and things like that, but the integration of technology with physical products, amiibos, etc. But I love Lego games, so Lego Dimensions is the one I chose. But playing any of these games and having to move the piece onto the thing and move it off and choose which characters, and oh, I need a guy who can shoot now, so I move one of those on. Mega Civilization. I have played Mega Civilization with 18 people. This is a very, very large war game. It takes all day. I've played once with 9 and once with 18. Well, 9 is on half the board, but this is a really good example of how to make 18 people playing a very hard, very deep war game possible. So it's not, you know, I recommend you play this, but it's difficult to get an 18-player game going. So. Of course, Minecraft, still best in breed for these kind of games. I mean, I love Terraria and I love Roblox and everything, but Minecraft, allowing players to generate content, whatever they want. My kids, that's pretty much all they do is have their face in the screen whenever possible, building giant statues out of blocks. And but they're also playing together when they do that, and they have a little world where they argue about what the next statue should look like. So Minecraft definitely recommended. So Monopoly. I recommend all game designers play Monopoly. I don't recommend you play Monopoly with other game designers. I recommend you play Monopoly with your family. And I recommend you remember how you used to play Monopoly with your family. So I don't enjoy playing a game of Monopoly the right way, but when my kids want to play Monopoly, I play with them. And that's because we don't play it the right way. We end the game when one person runs out of money, because now it's no fun for them anymore, and we're just like, okay, yay, somebody won, and whatever free parking rules you want, anything like that. But this is the game that, if most game designers think about it, is probably one of the first times they modified a game. They did design on a game. They developed a game. They were like, wow, this is kind of crappy. What do we do about this? And they start making rules about putting everything you pay from chance in the middle and taking it on free parking, or not allowing people to trade Park Place for Baltic Avenue or things like that. Rules come up that aren't actually in the box to make the game more suitable for your style. So, Monster Manor is one of the Street Pass games on your DS. It's one of my favorite of the Street Pass games. The important part here is that Street Pass is, if you have a DS and you're walking around with it in your pocket and you have Street Pass turned on, and you walk past anybody else who has their DS with Street Pass turned on, they'll talk to each other instantly. And they will, but they only share like this little, very limited piece of information that you have agreed to share, essentially. That's like your name, the color of the shirt of your Mii, and like and sort of how far along these games you are in some sense. And so at the end of the day, you'll pull out your DS and you'll go, oh look, 10 people. I ran into 10 people today, and you're like, oh, that person had a purple shirt, and you look at purple shirt. I needed a purple shirt because I'm trying to build a purple section up here. That's awesome that I ran into somebody with a purple shirt. I'm glad I ran into Dan from Okinawa, because it'll tell you all of these interesting information about them. And so, like, playing these games and learning about it and how they interact is really good for making players feel connected and glad that they ran into a random person. It's also really good for if you and your friends meet each other a lot, then it ramps up and ramps up and ramps up, and so you're like, oh, every day we've got to bring our DSs together. So that's also a really interesting thing that Street Pass does. Net is a trick-taking game, sort of like Bridge, sort of like all of those, but the way it works is everybody has a hand of cards, and as soon as you have your hand of cards, these are the rules of the game. There's basic rules of the game, and then there are rules about like which suit is trump, how many points a trick is worth, who is going to lead the first trick, and you take your turns by taking a counter and going, well, Bob's not leading the trick. Okay, and the next person's like, well, it's not worth 4 points. Tricks aren't worth 4 points. So all of that stuff. You will learn a lot about, and you're basically winnowing down by saying no to everything until you get to the last option in each of these categories, and that's the rules you're playing by for that round. So it teaches you the power of saying no, of winnowing options down until you get into the right option. And this is an interesting trick-taking game in that a lot of like in Bridge, you're always partnered with the same person. But in this one, your alliance can shift on any particular one. So you could be partnered with this one in one turn, and then in one hand, and then somebody else in another hand. And you're really playing for yourself, but your partnerships change. Overwatch, best in breed fighting game. Although I did this last year before, I might have put Fortnite up here now because it's sort of the new best in breed. But environment construction and competitive games, their maps are amazing. I mean, Blizzard has the resources to hire the best to make amazing maps. Team versus team play, and asymmetric roles in action play. Like in Fortnite, everybody sort of starts at the same, with the same guy basically. But here, you're definitely trying to coordinate the guy with the giant shield versus the person who puts turrets down versus all of that. Pandemic Legacy is one of my favorite games, which is interesting because I really don't like playing Pandemic. Legacy games are sort of a new thing where you play the game, and at the end of the game, or over the course of the game, this stuff, these stickers start getting placed on the board, and so the next time you play, there are new rules. The rules don't work quite the way they did before. Maybe you nuked Australia and this city doesn't exist anymore, which is an interesting way to play Pandemic, and everybody has their roles that grow over time. So this is also, though, Pandemic Legacy and most of the Legacy games are designed to be played from this state essentially to this state. And that state is a little fuzzier, but it has a story that goes across the entire things, and things that happen at certain points in the narrative. There's a narrative, right? Basically, you're creating this crafted experience with twists, because that's one of the best things, is opening them up and being like, oh my god, did you see what happened when we opened that box? And how to change mechanics over time and still make the gameplay fun. Plants vs. Zombies, the original. I worked on Plants vs. Zombies Heroes, which is like the 8th iteration of the game. But this game, if you've ever played the original Plants vs. Zombies, has the best pacing for introduction of mechanics that I've ever seen in a game. Just like the first game, you're basically playing with sunflowers and pea shooters, and then the next game they introduce the bombs, and then the next game they introduce a new thing, and they do a really good job of making it so that now that you've gotten the bombs, that they're important in that level. And it just teaches you how to play the game by giving you a new tool and then teaching you how to use it. And by the time you're up to here, where you're choosing, you have 6 different ones that you've chosen from 10 or 20 different ones, you've learned how to play the game. So I highly recommend that you play Plants vs. Zombies from the beginning and just keep in your mind how they're pacing everything. Patchwork is a 2-player game, exactly 2-player game. It does not work with 3 players. It does not work with 4 players. It works with exactly 2. So I recommend playing it and thinking about why it doesn't work for 3 players, why it doesn't work for 4 players. It's really just trying to pick up these pieces and fill your board and try to get it as exact as possible. Pokemon Go and many other similar games. It's the best. People have been trying to do this since phones had GPS systems, basically, to map what you're doing on your phone to a real-world location, and Pokemon Go is just the best way. So I definitely recommend playing Pokemon Go and thinking about like how it matters whether you're standing next to this or that, and how gyms matter and how raids matter and things like that. And it has an interesting physical coordination of learning the difference between throwing a regular ball and learning how to do curved balls is vital to your gameplay in many ways. But poker, of course, how real-world consequences affect gameplay. Gambling games. This is all gambling games, but poker is sort of the quintessential game that game designers should play, because it's got bluffing, it's got pot odds, it's got all kinds of interesting things to learn about positional, whether you're going to get to bet after somebody else or before them. Tons of things to learn from poker. Most of them fairly obvious if you played a lot of poker. All of the Pokemon games, from Pokemon Red Green back in the day up through Sun Moon and the new ones, the newest ones, they're good games to play as a game designer, and they were one of the first places in video gaming where like collecting, like gotta catch them all that's used in many other video games, but it's like creating that goal, that sort of desire for like, oh, I have to have the whole set. I'm going to do all of the things to do all of that. And it's a really good example too of you've got a party. This goes back to Dungeons and Dragons, sort of, although you make those decisions earlier in D&D. about like, oh, I'm gonna go into the rock gym. I need to have these Pokemon. Oh, I'm going into the water gym now. Well, I don't need those Pokemon anymore. I need to have different Pokemon, or learning things like that. The Quiet Year is it's a storytelling game. We'll say it's a storytelling game. Everybody, the world is ending, or the world. This is after the apocalypse. And you begin the game by drawing a map, and each player says something, like somebody drew this field and tells a little story about, these are the fields, this is where we're trying to get, this is the basis of where we're getting civilization back, is growing food, right? And then the next person's like, oh, okay, well, here's the road in the middle, and it's very important because this will connect us with other people. And then you continue to do that, you draw the map, and then you take turns. Like something happens, like a card gets flipped up that says something happens, and you have to react to that, but you also have to tell the story and make changes to the map. And so at the end of the game, you've got this map that over the course of the game evolves as you're like, oh, the stranger that was revealed on this card came from up here and is coming in. It's a great storytelling game, and at the end you have this map to sort of show how things are. I highly recommend it. There are two ways to play this game. There's the serious way to play this game, where everybody's like very, oh, here's the story of the apocalypse, and here's what's happening. And then I've seen people play it where they're like, oh, we're not doing really well harvesting the gummy bears out from under the roller coaster. That's not going, like, it's also a good example of like knowing your audience and playing with people that you want to play with. So Rock Band 3 or online or any of these. I picked Rock Band 3. There's actually better examples of this now, but it's one everybody knows. Gaming as a learning tool. Like, you can learn how to play the guitar starting in Rock Band 3. There are better games that do that, but you can use it. You can play this game and have a great time and start learning how to play the guitar by having the actual the controller that is a guitar. And that's an amazing thing, is that the depth of learning that you can learn that important of a skill, or that interesting and deep skill from playing games. Also, as we've talked several times in other games, cooperation between players with, this is an example of players with disparate skills. Because if I play it with my kids and they're banging on the drums, I just put them on no fail and they have a great time, and I'm actually playing my guitar and having a good time on my own. We have different skills. We're playing the same game. The experience at the end was, hey, we succeeded and we had a great time, and each of us had a great time, even though they're not just like, oh, Dad, what are we playing on hard for? Why are we playing on hard? That doesn't happen. Robot Turtles is a game where everybody programs their movement of their turtles, and they're trying to compete with goals and things here. This is a kids game, but this game, many of my friends whose kids love this game are starting to get into coding now, because this is the fundamental. This teaches the fundamentals of coding, step-by-step instructions, and planning ahead and executing those instructions. So gaming as education for kids, and making engaging games for kids because it's cute and it's turtles and you're trying to run over the right places and things like that. But very cool game. Portal 2, one of my favorite games of all time. The game overall is a really good, crafted puzzle game. But the cooperative puzzle solving, if you're playing with two players, I highly recommend it, because you can learn how to do many of the things we've talked about before about two people who are trying to coordinate their experience to get something done. TAC, my friend James, who will be talking actually after this, designed this game, TAC. It is a game that was taken from a piece of literature, my friend Pat Rothfuss's books, Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear. This game exists in there. It's described in there. It's a game the characters in the book play. So James did two amazing things with this game. It's an abstract game. You're placing pieces on there. You're moving them and jumping on top of other people's pieces. And you're basically just trying to make a line across the board of your color. James, one of the goals from the beginning was making the game feel like it has existed forever. This game feels like they could have been playing this 500 years ago. It feels like a classic game. We call that a classic game. I love designing these kind of games. I like making trick-taking games like like hearts and spades and things, but making them feel like they've existed, like they're just a game, like you could have played this with your grandparents. So that's a great thing. And also, this is designing to fit a license. There are descriptions of how this game works in the book. And so he had to take those descriptions that an author was just like, here's how they play it, yay! And he had to take that and make it into an engaging and fun game, and he succeeded. Silent Hill 2 is just a great example of how to scare players. If you've ever played Silent Hill 2, it's just, do not play it at night with your screen. Sounds might happen, and it will scare you a lot. So, Vast, has anybody played Vast? Okay, Vast is a board game. Each player, this player is the warrior, this player is the cave, this player is playing the board. There's a dragon and goblins and a thief running around. They all play the game in different ways, using the same components with different goals. So, and they're all competing. The cave wants to grow big enough and then collapse down and kill everybody. The dragon just wants to get out. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But competitive, equal gameplay, asymmetric, they're interacting all over the place, but their rules are vastly different in what they're trying to accomplish. StarCraft is a great example of, so before StarCraft, there was Warcraft, and there were a lot of there's a lot of RTSs, and most of them are either essentially the same side fighting itself, like we both have the same tech path, the same resources, the same troops, and we're just trying to see who does it better. And then it sort of evolved into like, no, you're playing it one way and I'm playing it another way. We each have different resources. We're against each other. And then StarCraft came along and showed that it was possible to do this with 3 sides, which is just mind-blowing. It's that, like the possible interactions between the Protoss, the Zerg, and the Terrans is amazing. And the fact that they've continued to do that, like balancing 3 sides in that environment. This will teach you a lot about how a Zerg rush works versus Protoss turtling and things like that. Has anybody ever played Werewolf? Werewolf is a fairly simple game. I'm not talking about 6 people playing Werewolf and it's like, oh, the villagers, we choose you. I'm not talking about one night Werewolf where we're all sitting around the table. I'm talking about 50 people playing Werewolf. Like, if you've ever been to a game convention and seen just like 50 people sitting in a corridor, there's a very good chance they're playing Werewolf, which is a ridiculous way to play Werewolf, but it happens all the time. And the only way 50 people can play this is to have a person who's a really good judge and is constantly like, all right, all the villagers close their eyes. Okay, the werewolves, open your eyes. Okay, all the werewolves close your eyes except the alpha. The alpha, like, they have to know all this stuff and be going through all the steps to get 50 people to coordinate and be like, all right, who do you choose to kill, and all of these things, right? Oh, you killed the seer. Like, all of that stuff, they have to know it, they have to be on top of it, and they have to coordinate 50 people doing it. So it's quite an experience, which usually devolves into, like, people talking a lot. All right, have you ever played A Tale in the Desert? Who has heard of A Tale in the Desert? This is an MMO. This is a very small MMO, but it has existed for the last 20 years at least, I think, 20? I think. So, you start off in this game, boom, ancient Egypt. Nothing. You have nothing. You literally have nothing. So you go over and you're like, oh, there's some clay. Okay, I can collect clay. Okay. Oh, I can collect some grass. That's great. What happens if hey, look, I can mix these together and make bricks. Oh, I make bricks. And I start making things. You start from that. Everybody starts from that with a blank ancient Egypt, and eventually there are pyramids. So it's an amazing ultimate sandbox. Like, everybody starts from scratch and builds up to ultimate pyramids. There are deep, deep, deep discoverable mechanics about, like, we were growing grapes one time and we had to move our entire process because the soil where we wasn't making the right kind of grapes. So we had them pick the whole thing up and move it to another spot in ancient Egypt. And then we'd have wine tastings and we'd be like, we're looking for oaky wines. These aren't oaky wines. Now we need more alkaline. It's crazy. And also large-scale social mechanics. At various points, every player in the game has to vote on who gets to be the pharaoh. Somebody gets to be the pharaoh, and that's not the end of the game. The other thing about this game is about every couple years, they just reboot it. They're like, okay, you guys have been playing this for a couple years now. We're moving on to the next round. Wipe everything, everybody start over again. Like, they're crazy, but this is an amazing game. X-Wing, miniatures game, structured freeform movement, one of the best examples of using these you can go anywhere you want, but you're structured in like, but this is the path you're going to take to do it, or you're going to choose this path. And also, really good example of building block army construction, where you're just like, I have this many points. I'm going to take this and this and this, and let's see what happens if Slave 1 and the Millennium Falcon are on the same side. You probably don't do that, but. World of Warcraft, another MMO. This is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. So World of Warcraft, when it came out, was not innovative. They would tell you, Blizzard would tell you right away, they did not innovate anything in this. Well, I mean, they did a little bit, but essentially all they did is made the best damn MMO they could make at the time, and they've continued to do that. So they went for perfection. At the time, every new MMO that was coming out was like, here's how we're different. We have housing, yay! Warcraft was like, nope. We're just going to make we're going to make this the best experience we can possibly make, and they did. They're a huge, great example of how to run a live service, how to keep things going. They've been going for almost 20 years now, or 15 years now. And they just continue to, they're making a new expansion that'll be out very soon. Episodic content creation, like playing World of Warcraft, especially now, watching how it's evolved is ridiculous if you played it back in the day. And you can just log in and you can be like, I've been to that dungeon, I want to go to that dungeon. Hit a button and you will be dropped into a group of people collected from every server. They're just like, oh, who wants to be in there? They make a party and you run through and you're done. Yay! It's amazing. Oh, that's me. Yes, well, we are at the end of our time. It's hard to go through 50 in 1 hour, so we have like emergency time. Yay! If anybody has any questions, we have some time to answer them. So great, I've dumped the knowledge successfully. All right, thank you very much. Oh yes.
So solo board games.
Yes. Yes.
So, small trend, or you think a lot of these little ideas from these games and then make that blow up?
That's a really good question. There have always been solo board games. There was a game, I want to say in the early 90s, called Chainsaw Warrior, which was an awesome solo experience, and it was designed. That was it. There was no multiplayer play. You got Chainsaw Warrior, and you ran it through and had a good time. But they've never been as popular as they are now, and I think part of it is that people are just used to playing games on their phone by themselves. So I can't really say whether it's going to be a huge trend, but the environment is definitely ripe for it, for more of these things to exist and more things. One of the things I get asked a lot designing board games, I still design board games, is like, oh, does it have a single player mode? And that's just sort of surprised me in recent years. Like, oh, single player? Well, some of them do. Let's see if we, let me see. Let's get back to the beginning here. So, Pathfinder, the adventure card game, it's a huge game, like 6 people can play it, but you can play it by yourself. It's totally 100% designed to be played by yourself. We did it from the get-go. There's 1,300 cards in this box, and that's that big of a game, and it's designed 100%. You can play it by yourself. In fact, the app is very similar to that in that the app is a single-player experience. I mean, you and somebody else could control the characters, but what else was I going to say? Anyways, yeah, so single player, incorporating single player into games is very new and cool, and I don't think it's going anywhere, but I don't think it's going to blow up. But yeah, I think a lot of it's due to the phones. So. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.